Hello everyone and welcome back to your weekly Beesness. The buzz this week was hand-curated by myself, art historian Celia Bugno, and I did want to give you all the heads up that, unfortunately, I am moving. Again. So, depending on the exact timeline that I end up with here, we may not have a July 21st Beesness. Just wanted to let you know in advance. For those wondering, the job hunt is going fairly well. I've had a couple of interviews. Nothing has landed just yet, but I'm remaining hopeful. And now, honeys, your buzz. A few follow-ups of note first. AI giant Midjourney has asked the court to reveal how plaintiffs against it, Disney, Universal, and Warner Brothers, use AI in the hopes of proving that they are, quote, doing the very thing they seek to punish, and, quote, using those tools to create and market movies and TV shows. This is the company's newest defense strategy in the ongoing IP-based or intellectual property-based legal battle to determine if the company can be held liable for, quote, facilitating widespread infringement of their copyrighted characters, end quote, for which Midjourney has claimed fair use. Midjourney's motion reads in part, quote, evidence of the plaintiffs developing image-generating AI models would equally demonstrate that it is an industry custom, even among the studios themselves, to download and train AI on unlicensed copyrighted content, end quote. Apparently, though, Judge John Kronstad did not agree. He refused to overturn his decision denying Midjourney's request for broader information in the AI use of its plaintiffs. And the studio's lead attorney, David Singer, called the motion a, quote, fishing expedition, end quote, intended to distract from the legal exposure here as studios, quote, simply want Midjourney to stop copying their movies and TV shows, end quote. This essentially shows us, honeys, that the legal battles over AI, intellectual property, and who can do what with these tools is far from over. Especially given Midjourney's consistent track record of copyright controversy since its launch. For example, another class action complaint against the company filed by 3 artists in 2023, which is still moving through the Northern District of California courts, and given a new headline which announced that the New York Times, the Daily News, and other media outlets have asked a Manhattan federal judge, as of Thursday, to impose sanctions on OpenAI, a rival company of Midjourney, in what Associated Press called, quote, an escalating fight over artificial intelligence and copyright that could shape the future of a struggling news industry, end quote, alleging that the ChatGPT maker is hiding crucial evidence that OpenAI and its business partner Microsoft built their AI technologies using millions of copyrighted news articles and are acting unfairly as competing information sources. OpenAI denied that request, saying its limitations on sharing ChatGPT logs is a measure to protect user privacy. Given what these AI tools do with our data, I'm not sure that's their strongest argument, but go ahead. Venice's arts workers under the Art Not Genocide Alliance also decided to mobilize and protest en masse last week in Venice's Campo San Zaccaria on the day billionaire Trump ally and U.S. ambassador to Italy Tillman Fertitta planned to park his 380-foot superyacht in the famed city. As part of a month-long cruise around Italy celebrating the 250th anniversary of the U.S., the participants wrote in social media statements about the matter that, quote, we refuse the capture of Venice by oligarchs, war profiteers, and the representatives of imperial power, end quote, while, quote, the United States continues to arm, finance, and politically shield Israel's genocide in Palestine, end quote. But the alliance had not yet responded to a request for comment as of the time of our recording. We noticed the headline, honeys, because the group and Venice's arts workers are making notable and historic good noise from the historic demonstrations in support of Palestine on May 8th, the last preview day of the 61st Venice Biennale this year, to this protest against Fertitta, all with its message remaining the same, quote, no business as usual with genocide, end quote. And here at home, 3 judges from the U.S. Court of Appeals for the District of Columbia Circuit determined on Wednesday that Trump and his attorneys had failed in previous court filings to prove that the Kennedy Center complex would be, quote, irreparably injured, end quote, by the removal of his name. And we'll admit the institution surprised us a little bit here. They argued in court that removing the name from the building, only to later restore it, would waste both, quote, time and money, end quote, and risk the loss of millions of dollars in gifts from donors who, quote, were only willing to do so with the name Trump on the building, end quote. But the judges apparently remained unmoved, noting that, quote, since that removal has already occurred, a stay would not avert those harms, end quote. Even as that drama plays out, crews draped tarps over the stone columns on the north side of the White House last week to hide the ugly parts of the new project to scrape away decades of paint in the latest of Trump efforts to remake the White House to his own tastes. And on July 4th, honeys, the White House attacked the Smithsonian for, quote, extreme political activism, end quote, via a 162-page report titled Saving America's Story, released by the White House Domestic Policy Council, which accused the Smithsonian Institution's leaders, namely the director of the National Museum of American History, Anthea Hardig, the first woman to lead the museum according to Hyperallergic, of failing to meet its obligations to the American people, and of, quote, having adopted an ideological framework that no longer treats the American story as a shared national inheritance to be taught or celebrated, end quote. The report alleges the museum puts a suspicious spin on so-called traditional patriotic narratives and takes issue with the museum's exhibits and education materials which discuss things like gender and sexuality, as well as immigration and indigenous rights. But multiple historians, as well as the Smithsonian's secretary, Lonnie Bunch III, refuted that White House report. In a staff memo sent out Tuesday, Bunch wrote, quote, while there will always be room for improvement, this report is not a fair characterization of the work and totality of the National Museum of American History, end quote, adding that the institution will carefully review the document and will comment as needed over the coming days. But this is, as our sources highlighted, a rare direct contradiction from Bunch, who has mostly played it cool when speaking in public about the administration's approach. And why we care here. As those of you following the story with us know, the report is only the latest in a string of attacks launched against the nonpartisan educational organization by the Trump administration since early 2025, and which has included repeated threats to withdraw funding, perform a comprehensive review of the Smithsonian's current and planned exhibitions to, quote, assess tone, historical framing, and alignment with American ideals, end quote, and the administration's March 2025 executive order demanding it end so-called divisive narratives across the institution's venues and programs. While it does not call for Trump or his administration to take specific actions, it does say that the president has a, quote, duty and obligation to seek reforms of the Smithsonian, end quote, and calls on the Chief Justice of the U.S. as Chancellor of the institution, plus the Vice President as a regent of it, and the President of the Senate and the Speaker of the House to take, quote, appropriate action, end quote. Also being called on to take action, the public, by historians who are asking that we, quote, document exhibits and labels fearing that they may be altered or removed by the administration, end quote, as it zeroes in on U.S. cultural institutions as part of Trump's political agenda. Speaking of the American Museum of Natural History, we learned that its entire collections are coming under review as more than 2,700 Native American hair samples originally collected for the 1893 World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago, and which should have already been returned under the 1990 law called the Native American Graves and Protection Repatriation Act, aka NAGPRA, are now scheduled to be returned. A bit of context here. Despite protests from Native groups, many major American museums have for the last 30-ish years interpreted that law to apply only to bones and not hair, but a 2024 update to the act clarified that all human remains, unless freely given or naturally shed, must be repatriated. The museum had previously admitted it holds the remains of around 12,000 individuals, including those of indigenous and enslaved people, quote, many of which were collected through practices now seen as illicit, abusive, or racist, end quote, according to Art Forum. So, a couple of why we cares here. As both Shannon O'Loughlin, a lawyer for the Association on American Indian Affairs, and Melanie Carson, a historic preservation officer for the Mississippi Band of Choctaw Indians, pointed out, quote, the fact that there has been no transparency, even after 30 years of knowing the hair samples were part of the collection, is going to raise trust issues, end quote. And even though our federal government rarely enforces penalties for violating NAGPRA, the museum could face up to $23 million in fines for holding out on disclosing those hair samples, but nonetheless asked Congress to increase funding for NAGPRA-affiliated programs. And Why We Care Part 2 last week was a huge one for the repatriation area of the art world / art law, and gives us hope for a true sea change regarding looted objects. A basic rundown of those: France returned 23 Syrian treasures after 15 years. Those objects included Roman bronze objects, Byzantine and Islamic era pieces, and a vibrant mosaic panel which made their way home aboard French President Emmanuel Macron's presidential aircraft on his landmark visit to Damascus, quote, the first by a major Western leader since the ouster of Bashar Assad in late 2024, end quote, according to AP News. The Syrian Foreign Ministry said that this return makes France the first country to cooperate with its national campaign to recover antiquities held abroad. The Netherlands and Germany also agreed to return 2,000 Ghanaian artifacts to the nation, which includes ceremonial objects and traditional regalia currently held in German and Dutch museums, as well as private collections, and were taken from the country during the colonial era. Those will be returned in phases following further consultations between Ghanaian and European authorities. We've noticed that Ghana has steadily increased the pressure on European nations to return objects looted during the colonial era in recent years, and this feels like the culmination. Meanwhile, New York investigators returned 59 looted antiquities to Italy, Iraq, and Indonesia on Wednesday, including 45 seized from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, such as a terracotta vase attributed to the famed Troilus painter and, quote, two of the earliest known sculptural depictions of the human figure in the round, end quote. In the round means that there are details all the way around the sculpture. You can walk around it and it will be carved on the backside too. And statements by Jerusalem-based nonprofit, the World Jewish Restitution Organization, let us know that the Italian parliament is advancing legislation to create a formal process for restitution of art and cultural property looted by the Nazis under Italian fascist racial laws, said Gideon Taylor, president of the organization, quote, while operational and legal details remain to be resolved as the bill moves forward, this is a vital step toward creating a framework for restitution, end quote, an area in which Italy had made only, quote, some progress, end quote, over the past 25 years, according to a 2024 study by the organization and the Claims Conference on Jewish Material Claims Against Germany. And Yemen's General Authority for Antiquities claims that 8 of the country's looted artifacts are headed for sale at Bonhams and Apollo art auctions in London, while 20 others are currently held in the British Museum. None of these entities had responded to requests for comments as of the time of this recording, but Art News writes that the museum's, quote, catalog of ancient Southern Arabian artifacts offers clear contenders for the approximately 20 artifacts, end quote. And a bit of a change of pace here. Texas has covered up a beloved Black Artists Matter mural across 11th Street in a part of East Austin today known as the city's Black Cultural District. It was originally painted by dozens of community members in June of 2020, but its destruction came on Thursday at the order of Texas Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who threatened last fall to withhold roadway funding from municipalities that did not, quote, remove any and all political ideologies, end quote, from their streets. We're bringing up the headline, honeys, because as Hyperallergic reminds us, Abbott's government characterized the order as a way to reduce driving distractions by making roads, quote, uniform and predictable, end quote, but critics have denounced the measure as a subtle way to erase Black and LGBTQ plus history from public visibility. Especially since crash data presented by Austin officials to the state in November showed the works, quote, do not pose a risk to safety, end quote. Ishia Adams, executive director of the Austin Justice Coalition, which oversaw the work's creation, said via email to today's sources that the removal of the community artwork signaled that, quote, erasure of Black folks in Austin is consistent, end quote. And frankly, she's right. This street artwork is one of at least 15, including LGBTQ plus pride rainbow crosswalks, that Austin Transportation plans to remove per its own documents through this August in compliance with that order. Meanwhile, artist Micheline Thomas was accused of copyright infringement by a Chicago photographer. Court documents obtained by our sources regarding the suit, filed in Illinois Federal District Court in May, claim that Thomas, known for her paintings and photo-based collages, quote, appropriated more than a dozen, end quote, of Barbara Krantz images from her 820 Ebony Jet series without attribution or consent. Krantz had photographed the vacant interiors of Johnson Publishing Company in Chicago, one of the largest African-American media companies in America and former owner of Ebony and Jet magazines, for the series, and claims that Thomas used them without permission in her 2024 exhibition All About Love, as well as other individual works. And the Why We Care here, there's quite a bit on the line. Thomas's reputation, for one, especially with this being the second active suit against Thomas within the last year. The first was by her former business partner and fiancée, Raquel Chevermont, who accused Thomas of harassment and non-payment, as well as the reputations of the 4 galleries who the suit alleges participated in that quote-unquote willful copyright infringement by displaying Thomas's allegedly appropriative work in person and online. But most importantly, we think, is that Krantz financial prospects, according to her suit, are on the line, as Thomas's exhibition put the sales of her forthcoming photo book, 820 Ebony Jet Visions of the Johnson Publishing Company and American Icon, at risk, says the lawsuit. Last week was also a big one for new jobs. Massimiliano Gianni was named director of the new museum in New York after the last 12 years as its artistic director. Frank Feltens will become the chief curator at the Seattle Art Museum. And David Oto, we learned, will be the next leader of the Honolulu Museum of Art. Under his leadership, the Georgia Museum of Art saw annual attendance rise to a record 61,000. And Shika Hor Al-Qassami was announced as the new chairperson of the Sharjah Museums Authority. In that role, she will oversee the Emirates' over 20 museums. She'll be making the transfer from her current role as president and director of the Sharjah Art Foundation. We heard as well that artist Jonathan Allen, whose temporary guerrilla installations typically appear as vinyl stickers over New York City subway advertising displays, superimposed messages condemning Israel's violence in Gaza onto the advertising displays of the Whitney Museum last week at around 10:30 p.m. on July 2nd. Today's sources say that one screen, quote, bore an excerpt from a conversation that took place between activists and authors Angela Davis and Ta-Nehisi Coates at the University of Michigan in 2025, end quote, wherein Coates stated, quote, if you can't draw the line at genocide, you probably can't draw the line at democracy, end quote, while discussing the Democrats' failed 2024 Harris presidential campaign. And we decided to highlight this story for you because the interpretation of this action seems to follow what's becoming a familiar script, wherein the attention ends up focused on the artist's intentions instead of on the message to stop the genocide. The installation attracted attention from the right-wing doxing X account Stop Anti-Semitism, which accused the artist of, quote, vilifying Jews, end quote, not surprising, but a claim the artist denies, while the Whitney's director of communications said that, quote, the museum maintains a zero-tolerance policy for vandalism, harassment, discrimination, or bias of any kind, end quote. A little surprising to see a total denouncement of the art intervention by them. Meanwhile, Allen explains that, quote, contextualizing this message within the corporate art complex is part of the point, to break through the niceties and apolitical nature of many contemporary art settings, end quote, and that, quote, intervening in public settings is integral to the project. I want these interventions seen by anyone passing by, end quote. Meanwhile, the London National Gallery was gifted an Angelica Kauffman painting, Achilles discovered among the daughters of Lycomedes from 1787 to 88, along with two other works by Swiss artists. Those donors were Dallas-based art collectors who specialize in the area, Richard and Luba Barrett, who have previously given over 400 works of Swiss art to the University of Texas in Dallas. The Why We Care Here, Kauffman was one of the most successful female painters of the 18th century and one of only two female founding members of the Royal Academy of Arts in 1768. But this marks her first history painting in oils to become part of a UK national collection since 1835. The one given that year is believed to have been destroyed by Nazi bombing raids while on loan in 1941. Next up, a headline indicating that heisting might be the new norm. Le Monde reports that thieves stole an estimated 27 archival objects worth about 4 million euros or 4.57 million US from northeastern France's Lalique Museum in the early morning of July 5th, forcing it to temporarily close. Lalique himself trained as a jeweler and freelanced as a designer for Cartier and Boucheron in the late 19th century before making his own name by pivoting to finely detailed wearables and decorative sculptures. So, honeys, despite all that push for greater security after the infamous October Louvre heist, according to a source speaking to the AFP, Lalique's protective measures were still, quote, not sufficient. An alarm went off, but by the time the security company had completed its checks, it was a cleaning lady who arrived first on the scene who called police, end quote. The museum's vice president was a bit more explicit in the blame, calling it a, quote, major failure, end quote, on the part of their contracted private security company. And that followed another nighttime French robbery at the Southwestern Centre Archéologique du Montans on June 30th, which, according to the official reports, appeared to be met with minimal difficulty because that museum has no video surveillance system. The long and short of this story, get your security together, France, and swipers, no swiping. Another true crime headline here, a UK businessman became the first to be convicted of and fined for violating sanctions in an attempt to ship 4 artworks to Russia. Police got the name of Jonathan Hornby from Sotheby's, where he tried and failed to sell statuettes he claimed were cyclitic antiquities with fake provenance documents. He pled guilty on July 1st to attempting to circumvent 2022 sanctions, which strictly prohibit the export of luxury goods, oil refining goods, quantum computing goods, and others from the UK to Russia. He's been fined $40,242 US. Headlines also told us that the artist who happens to serve as Albania's prime minister, Edi Rama, defended his plans to host a controversial Kanye West concert near Tirana, describing the claims of his detractors as, quote, scorpion-tailed lies to poison Albania, even as the Albanian media itself quotes prominent Jewish groups accusing the rapper of anti-Semitism. The debate between president and people caught our attention because Rama is already facing a mass outcry for his resignation, known as the Flamingo Revolution, which was sparked by his plan to allow a group of investors, including Jared Kushner, to build a luxury resort along the Balkan coast, and so this latest controversy is sure to only intensify the heat on him. And a couple other announcements and discoveries to close us out this week. Hacks has broken the Emmy record for comedies with 24. HBO Max claimed the top spot for both drama and comedy, as the show The Pit nabbed 25 nominations. A fond farewell to Bonnie Tyler, the voice behind Total Eclipse of the Heart, who passed away at 75. The Grammy-nominated Welsh pop star's family said Thursday in a statement on her website that Tyler died unexpectedly in a hospital in Portugal where she was being treated for an unspecified illness. Meanwhile, a Dutch museum honored a late artist by covering its floor in 80 pounds of peanut butter. According to the Associated Press, that's enough to make 15,000 sandwiches. The artist in question here was conceptual artist Wim T. Shippers, who died last month at age 83 and first created the peanut butter floor in 1969. The tribute work was unveiled on Thursday at an offshoot of the museum Boijmans van Beuningen in Rotterdam, where it will stay for a 2-month show. And as Hyperallergic writes, quote, confirming that people will buy anything, New York City artist Justin Gignac has already sold out of an edition of his 50 pocket-sized vitrine boxes filled with street trash found outside of the Taylor and Travis wedding, end quote. The dated wedding trash edition is one of several lines from Gignac's New York City Garbage ongoing project, which is exactly what it sounds like, and began during a college internship as, quote, an effort to dispute a coworker's claim that packaging design doesn't matter, end quote, according to our sources. He described the experience of collecting the trash as, quote, not as dirty as I was expecting, end quote, and explained that the art is in the sale rather than the cube because of its underlying message. Quote, if you can sell people garbage, then it shouldn't be a problem to sell them stuff they actually need, end quote. For those wondering, each vitrine of the wedding trash edition went for $25. Some good news for funding in this area as well. The Fundación Kahlo has established a new $50,000 biennial grant, which will be awarded to emerging Mexican artists to help develop their practice. And the Warhol Foundation announced $5.2 million in grants for its spring 2026 cycle. Those funds will go to 78 arts and cultural organizations, including 33 first-time grantees, said the Warhol Foundation's program director, Rachel Bears, quote, our recent grant program expansion reflects the foundation's belief that small-scale institutions are just as vital as their larger and better-known counterparts to the overall health of the arts ecosystem in this country. Each has a crucial role to play in supporting the complexity and diversity of contemporary artistic practice. End quote, mic drop, heck yes. And finally, we heard that BTS will bring their Arirang World Tour to London's Korea Foundation Gallery through a curated museum route created in collaboration with the British Museum. The specialized exhibition, known at this point as the Korea Gallery Art Trail, is designed to connect 5 distinct historical objects featuring traditional Korean craftsmanship to the thematic core of the group's 5th studio album and tour itself. This also, however, serves as a really neat preview to a major 2,000-year survey of Korean creativity opening at the British Museum in October of 2026. And there you have it, honeys, our stories for this week. I hope you have learned something fascinating, heard something that caught your attention, and made you want to ask more questions. Please feel free to DM us with said questions. Wishing you happiness, health, and hydration in this ever-increasingly hot summer. This is your host, Celia, telling you to take care. We will talk next week. This episode of Highbrow Honeys, the Beesness was researched, fact-checked, recorded, edited, Hosted and produced by master's degree holder in art history Celia Bugno, but Chris Meinhold is our master of music.